Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome all the panelists. Thank you for taking out your time and being here with us today. So for our viewers and for the audience to get to know a little bit more about you and your experience, let's start with a quick round of introductions. We'll start with you, Mr. Dharmender, what you do and a little bit about your organization.
I'm Dharmender Tuteja, currently working as CFO in Dalmia, Bharat. It's a cement organization. I've been working with them for about last 12 years. Worked in commercial as well as finance domains and reached here. Prior to that, I was working as CFO in Humboldt Vedag for about 5 years. And in fact, I started my journey with the Steel Authority, Bokaro Steel Plant, did stint with the Gripco and Control Switchgear and Samtel before coming to now Dalmia. Look forward to today's session. Thank you.
This is Nikhil, Sohoni, and I work for Blue Star. Blue Star is a HVACR company that is heating, ventilation and air conditioning. It's an 80-year-old organization. I'm with them for last 2 years as a group CFO. And prior to that, I was with Mahindra & Mahindra for 28 years. Yeah.
So I'm Richa. I work for Pernod Ricard. For those of you who are not very familiar with the name, we are the brand owner or sellers of whiskies like Imperial Blue, Royal Stag, Glenlivet, Chivas, and so on and so forth. I'm hoping most of you have seen or at least tried some of our whiskies. Prior to this, I've had a long career in finance, but also I've had some stints in business leadership and CEO roles, largely in the FMCG sector and a bit of medical devices. So it's interesting where I am today, and I do feel very passionate about this topic about ethics, especially in the industry and where I'm sitting. And trust me when I say this, when it comes to ethics, for me and my company, this is the only way to survive. And that's why it's my first more priority. And I'll speak more, of course, later.
Very good afternoon. Thanks to Business World for having me here. And good afternoon to all the audience. Myself, Rohit Nayyar. I'm currently the CFO of Wadhwani Foundation. This is the philanthropic initiative of Dr. Ramesh Wadhwani. He's a Padma Shri based in the US. And we are into the business of creating jobs. So we are trying to partner with all the large institutions to help create more jobs for the youth, which I think it's really need of the hour. Prior to this, for my first 2 decades were spent in the for-profit industry, and then I moved to this sector. So it's been really quite an interesting and exciting journey. And of course, ethics, as Richa also said, I think that has been always the North Star, whether you work in a for-profit entity or a not-for-profit. So look forward to an engaging discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So coming back to the topic for this discussion is ethics and integrity in financial leadership. You know, today organizations, they're characterized by globalization, by technological innovation. There's constant scrutiny from stakeholders, from investors, from regulatory bodies. And the role of CFOs and financial leaders, it has never been more critical than today, right? They have to uphold the ethics, the ethical standards of the organization. I want to keep my first question open to all the panelists. Rohit, I'll start with you. What could be some ethical dilemmas that financial leaders face on a regular basis?
Ethics is the difference between what you have as a right to do and what is right to do. I think that's sometimes becomes a very thin line. Sometimes, like, as they often say, business ethics is an oxymoron. I think that also needs to be challenged, because ultimately it is the balance between how you grow as a business and also you follow all the rules and regulations, because that's what makes you as a long-term sustainable business. So, like, there are no shortcuts to success, and as we all know, reputation, it takes decades to be built and can be just gone in matter of seconds, and we have seen several such examples. So I think in day-to-day operations also for a CFO, often these issues come up, and I'm sure all my panelists could also throw more light on that, where there is always an easy way also to do things, but then there is a right way to follow the process and ensure to have a win-win solution for the organization, for the business, for the people, for the team we work. Because tone at the top is very important here in this aspect, that, when faced with such situations, what is the tone at the top? how as leaders we react to such situations, how we are ready to go through, analyze the situation rather than just going for a quick.
Using the funds, it's about utilizing the funds in the most effective manner so that there is maximum impact to be felt by the beneficiaries. Because that's what the intention of the donor also is when they are putting aside large amount of funds, whether it is CSR or the other initiatives. So that's where the role of CFO becomes even more critical to really understand and evaluate that how does the funds get allocated, how the resources are being utilized, and whether it's again just an easy way to use the fund, which I think is a given, versus the most effective and efficient way of using the funds, whether it reaches to the last mile beneficiary. And that's where technology of late, as we all can appreciate, has made a big change. Instead of again, today we have the facility of direct transfers, bank transfers. So I think CFO needs to be at the forefront of adopting technology, adopting these best practices, implementing all these processes, change in the organization. Really needs to be the catalyst for this change, because it's very difficult to otherwise track transactional level. Unless you put in a full ecosystem of efficient processes and systems in place, then only you can channelize all these investments in the most efficient manner. So it's again, it's a journey, because new things come up, expectations come up, as my fellow panelist says. The cross-functional teams may have their own reasons to do things in a certain way, which as a CFO again, we cannot be guided by our own personal ambitions or preferences. It has to be what is right for the for our beneficiary in our case of the sector, or for the shareholders, or for the community at large. And that's I think that's where the CFO really needs to demonstrate through various actions and leading from the front that this needs to be done in a specific way. But of course, one cannot also follow an approach of my way or a highway. So that is where collaboration across sectors, across the cross-functional teams are important, so that we all together make it a win-win solution.
Right, thank you. Richa, we already got your views on this. Mr. Nikhil, do you have...
I feel very strongly about this, that competitive advantage and ethics are not exclusive. They coexist. A sustainable competitive advantage really comes from product differentiation, pricing, superior consumer service. Whenever you have to make that trade-off, that's echoing on ethical dilemma. That means it's a short-term gain, it's not sustainable. And there's so many examples, where companies have come in and they've gotten the competitive advantage not because they did something wrong, not because they tried for a short-term win, but they really came up with offerings that changed the game in the market. I mean, I can talk about some FMCG offerings. If I talk about it, most of you would be familiar with diapers. Diapers existed in India for the last 20, 25, 30 years. Procter & Gamble came with Pampers, took over the market from Snuggie and a few other brands. Later came Mami Popo and took away the market from Procter & Gamble, and every time it was product differentiation. I do want all of you to reflect on this, that let's not assume that it's exclusive.
Thank you. Mr. Nikhil, my next question to you is, when we talk about ethical values and integrity, it's very important for organizations to embed these values across the organization and also in the teams, especially if we talk about the finance space, right? As a leader, how do you embed these values across the organization in the decision-making process and also in the corporate culture?
It has to be in the organization's DNA. It can't be that you will start doing it. It is something which the organization has or does not have, and the leadership has to walk the talk. So if you are recommending it, you have to ensure that first you demonstrate it. So in your whatever decisions you take, in the actions that you show, you should demonstrate it from day one. Second, very important thing to build it as a culture is to have awareness. See, many a times that you will have new people joining, you will have people joining from outside your organization. So the culture is something which has to be built, and when you have to build that culture, you have to ensure that people are aware of what the culture of the organization is. So it is very important to build awareness, to have training sessions which are voluntary and if required even mandatory. So that is something which is very important. You have to assign responsibilities. You have to ensure that there is a freedom for people to speak up, because unless people speak up, you will not know what's going wrong in the organization and where. So the speak up culture has to be embedded in the organization at all levels. And more and most important is a listening culture. You have to listen, because if you don't listen, then it's no use speaking up also. So you have to listen to everyone at whatever levels, not only at a particular level. It could be the lowest rung employee of your organization, but you should be ready to listen. So if you kind of build this kind of culture within the organization, where there is an awareness, there is responsibility, there is people who walk the talk, there is speak up, there is listen, automatically it gets embedded in the culture. And that's how it will get built into the organization over the years. Culture is something which has to be done over the years. It's not something which will happen overnight. And once done, it stays with the organization forever.
Monitoring, identifying, and mitigating ethical risks is very important, especially in financial reporting or, let's say, auditing or corporate governance as well. How do you do that as a finance leader?
Yeah, I think that's very important. That first of all, there has to be a common thread. We all need to identify the right things, because right could have a very different meaning for different stakeholders, different parts of the organization. But it's very, very important to define the core principles, the core values of the organization. And that is where tone at the top and leading by example becomes paramount. So there are often, I'm sure, CFOs of especially the listed companies face this dilemma of the short-term stock exchange reactions to the long-term sustainable growth. So that's where the role of the CFO also becomes very, very critical, so that there are no excuses done or no shortcuts taken for just to meet a specific requirement which could jeopardize the long-term interest of the organization. So during that process, there could be multiple discussions with the stakeholders, whether it's your auditors or your CEO, and that is where the CFO really needs to hold the light up and really keep pushing or keep having this conversation ongoing and the dialogue ongoing, that how certain things needs to be disclosed, and how certain transactions need to be reported. And as Mr. Narayan Murthy famously said, when in doubt, disclose. So I think that becomes the ultimate sort of guiding force for a CFO, that whenever you feel there is some confusion or there is some dilemma, it's always better to disclose. And that holds good for the long-term growth of the organization.
Ricard, when it comes to KPIs and metrics, we are definitely in the process of setting up a lot of KPIs across the different P&L lines, starting from discounts. So the kind of discounts that go to retailers, to distributors, in the manufacturing plants, the kind of wastages or scrap or anything that's getting reported. We put our internal controls filter on each of these to make sure if there's anything, any deviation, it triggers a red flag or an alert, which our audit teams then go and audit. I'll not say that we've completed the journey, but we're really trying hard to put a KPI lens into a compliance and control center. Now the second part of your question, what else can we do or how do we make sure this happens? While we are setting up these KPIs, we also work very, very strongly with our external auditors. I think they play a very, very strong role in keeping us honest and keeping us, very clear on what really needs to be reported. Very, very transparently, focusing again on clear communication and transparency. We share whatever is happening within the company, outcome of our internal audits, internal reports, compliance checks with our external auditors, and we let them decide that how much of that is really relevant from an external investor, external regulator perspective that we should disclose, and we don't intervene.
At Dalmia, how are you identifying, how are you mitigating these ethical risks?
I think starting with the understanding between the promoters, MD and the CFO and the top leadership, that whenever any ethical issues will come, the CFO will have a kind of veto right, and you can always question that this is not okay and will not allow it to go. When you're dealing with, let's say, promoter family companies, and this examples came in the last couple of years, we took a call that, see, this is the only value at which we will project with you. This was not based on some kind of a fair valuation report or XYZ, because valuation can be taken anyway. What we felt right was this is the right way to transact things. It will take care of the concerns of the minority investors or the larger stakeholders. And this is the way it has to be done. That was the line before going into the transaction. In the end, ultimately, promoters also lost. But for him, the valuation of the larger company is much greater. So he respected our position. Same thing comes when it deals with the situation of, let's say, any kind of ethical complaints come. Nowadays, if I compare my experience, let's say earlier versus last couple of years, the time being devoted to the ethical complaints handling as a part of ethics committee members, that has changed. A lot of time we have to handle these complaints and dispose of quickly. There will always be some situations where some employee has done something wrong. If we try to sit over it and, let's say, not handle it in the right way, it becomes that management is part of this kind of conspiracy or management is part of this wrongdoing. So, decisive actions, timely, that is most important. And whenever, let's say, we're dealing with the investors, be transparent. Don't try to be, let's say, kind of bad news. How to ensure consistency and predictability, that is important to demonstrate. So, I think compared to my earlier experience versus recent years, we have changed the way we deal with the business team members. Earlier it used to be that whatever results come from the business team, finance has to ensure that consistent growth should be shown to the investors. That means we'll adjust in the accounting. Sometimes we'll release the provisions, sometimes we'll create the provisions. That concept has changed. Now we push the business team that we have to ensure consistent performance and predictable performance, which will get demonstrated and presented to the investors. Because any kind of adjustments you do in the accounting, it becomes really apparent. Because nowadays investors are so demanding that each and every KPI is told to them in the either press release or in the investor call. They can simulate your business model, forecasting model in their own spreadsheet. So anything you try to do, it will easily catch up. So all these actions, I think, clearly demonstrate that there's only one way to handle this is the right way.
Very well said. Thank you. Nikhil, your views on, in case an ethical lapse or integrity breach, what are the next steps for a CFO?
If there is ethical breach,
Yes.
I think there are no two thoughts on that. If there is an ethical breach, there is only one solution. If the person has committed it, he goes. I think there is no two views on that, from my side at least. Because the ethical breach is something very serious. Okay, there can be an error, there can be a mistake, but if you are doing an ethical breach, you cannot say that I was not aware of it. See, because therefore I said, when you are building a culture, you have a culture of awareness. You cannot have an employee in your organization who is not aware of what are the ethics in which you have to operate. So there is no pardoning for ethical breach. That's a given rule. Because if once you make an exception, there is no end to it. Then there will always be some exception which you will have to keep making. There will always be a reason why something has been done. So there is only one way of doing business, and that is the right way of doing business. As I said, there is no right way of doing the wrong thing. So to that answer, it's a very simple answer, that if someone does an ethical breach, then that's the end of the thing at that point of time. And it does not matter what the amount involved is. It can be a large amount or it can be a small amount. Because when a person does it even for a voucher, what it shows a character. And that is what is not right. Because if you have that kind of a character, I think it's like it will spoil the entire organization. So you need to be very clear on all these rules, and organization has to send the right messaging when they do it. Because if again, at what level a person is does not matter. Okay, if the person may be at the highest level, and he may have done a thing with the smallest thing, but I think he still has to go. Once that messaging is clear, you will ensure that the organization, everyone behaves ethically in all the decisions.
Richa, what trends, looking ahead, what trends do you foresee in the intersection of upholding ethics and also financial leadership?
I can touch upon once again on what I mentioned, that it's going to be a lot about leveraging technology, setting up clear data analytics, artificial intelligence that's going to help you capture trends, capture behavior that could be generating a lot of red flag. Also, if I talk about the future and financial leadership and how does it weave ethics into it, we as finance leaders today are no longer simply accounting and reporting people. For us to be successful, we have to be influencers. And this is where I do want to highlight that as finance leaders, yes, our key role also is stewardship. We are custodian for ethics. But we need to make sure we enroll senior management with us or the board with us in the agenda for ethics and integrity, and that's when we'll be successful. So support the organization with very good analytics, support the organization with finding business solutions to what is needed to deliver growth, but at the same time be a spokesperson and find other spokesperson, including the MD and the CEO, who's going to stand and talk about ethics, reward ethics, and be with you if you have to really use the stick when it comes to incorrect behavior.
Thank you, Richa. Mr. Dharmender, I'll come back to you. What trends do you foresee?
In the investing world, a lot of institutional players have come in, be it FIIs, FPIs, or even local mutual funds. So all of them clearly demand very high premium on the governance. And that is a starting point for even selecting a company, whether it should be in their portfolio or not. So ensuring that your processes are right and when you create a long-term sustainable value, it's important that ethical way of doing things is going to be there. In the same industry, who will get picked up by these players for investment will be the leading players having a very high, impeccable record of governance. So, of course, technology will definitely come to play, but it demands a premium. You can replicate the methods being deployed by one player for cost reduction, for sales maximization, but replicating this governance journey, I think that is more difficult to achieve. And it is not like you have to tick box 10 things, that if I do these 10 things, I'll be very governed, ethical company. It is a mindset change. Mindset change doesn't come overnight. It is not a tick box of 10 things that I've done RPT transactions, I've got them audited, I've taken care of this, I've taken care of that, I've done the code of conduct, I've done the roadshows. So these tick boxes will not help you to get that culture of ethical business company. Mindset change will take a couple of years. Mindset change is very, very difficult on the promoter side, on the top management side, demonstrating it day-to-day actions and replicating for all the juniors. I think that once you create, it's a sustainable competitive advantage. I think that is the path everybody would prefer that companies will march towards.
Thank you, sir. Rohit, do you have something to add? Also, we have a lot of students here, so any piece of advice for the freshers and for the talent who are looking to become financial leaders like you?
So I think CFO has a unique role in the organization. With all due respect to all the leaders across functions, CFO can really chart out or connect the dots across the organization. So sometimes the different business leaders may just be focusing on their stream of business or their lines of operations. But as a CFO, you get to see the full view, and it's very important to comprehend and get that full view so that we can collaborate with the specific business people on where are we doing correctly, where do we need some course correction. So I think that dialogue is very, very important in this role as a CFO to be successful, because ultimately it's about adding value to the organization. Now, financial reporting has also moved, or it's rapidly moving away from being just a diagnostic reporting to more predictive and prescriptive. So with the advent of technology, nobody is expecting the CFO to just rattle out the last month's sales number. I think that's like not at all any value add, but the story behind it, what drove the sales, and the actions which the organization is taking, how will that impact the growth, the profitability in the coming quarters or years. I think that is what the insights which the organization is looking at from the CFO. So that's where the CFO cannot no longer be just sitting in the back room or in the corner room. The CFO has to be at the forefront, engaging with all the business leaders, trying to understand how we create value or how can we create more and more value for the organization. And again, balancing agility with compliance. Again, we just cannot go all out We need to respect for the compliance. We need to respect for the organizational policies, the ethical way of working, and that's easier said than done. So I would encourage each one of you that this is you really need to climb up the stairs, as they say. There is no elevator available, and it's a journey. I think we all have faced that in our careers. We continue to face the challenges, but as long as you are clear, and as I strongly believe, there is no softer pillow to rest than a clear conscience. So I think that's what it's very important that as we build our network, we should also take care of our life's work and continue to move forward.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Can I
Mr.
add,
Guru.
one analogy for the students.
Sure, sure.
Many of you must have seen this movie 12th Fail. So if you notice that there was an example of should you do cheating or should you do hard work and then pass. In cheating you may get 80% marks, but ultimately it's not a sure shot way of success throughout your life. When you do the hard work, even if you get second division, ultimately you can succeed in a life. So similar is the example in corporate world. All these shortcuts will never take you far. This can give you success in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, maybe 2 years. But this will catch up. Whereas if you are following the ethical practices, you have a long way to create your success story. I think that's a very clear-cut example with your student life in the real corporate world.
Amazing advice. I hope students have taken a note. And Mr. Nikhil, your closing remarks.
I'll say that be open, be honest, be consistent with what you're doing. You have to build trust, because if you build that trust, then you can ask for what you want people to do. So it will not come if you force them. You should demonstrate the trust, that trust. Then only it will happen. That is the most important thing. So you have to be bold as a CFO. You cannot be timid. It may be 1 against 8 in your leadership team also, but you have to stand for that. So you have to stand for values whenever required without worrying about what are the consequences. Because when you do that, and when you demonstrate that again and again, you get that trust, you earn that respect, and you will be able to do what is right for the organization.
Richa, your closing remarks.
So for the young ones over here, I do want to say that it's as you start your career, so maybe if you're early in your career, it's very easy to get swayed by the word business partnering. And I do know a lot of young talent always want business partnering roles. Till the time you're in finance, you'll always have to carry the stewardship hat. And you need to remember, business partnering does not mean closing your eyes and letting your business teams do what they want. Business partnering means helping them do the business right in the right way, in a way that will ensure long-term sustainability and growth for your organization. And as a finance person, especially when you are young, and you may not be that bold, or it may not be right for you to always speak up against your teams or vehemently put a point across, it's good to find support systems or alternative channels where you can seek a second opinion transparently without offending the other person. So you can keep your friends, you can look and be a strong collaborator, yet when in a dilemma, always reach out for a second, third opinion and speak to the right channel who can support you in this journey.
Thank you for the insightful discussion. A big round of applause for all of you.